I'm Rachel Bell, and this is Your Last Meal, the show where celebrities share stories about the foods they love most, and we dig into the history, culture, and science of those meals with experts from around the world. Today on the program, comedian and actor David Cross. David is best known for his roles as Tobias Funke on Arrested Development and Mr. Show. He has a new podcast called Senses Working Overtime, a new comedy special called Worst Daddy in the World, and he's performing 3 shows at SF Sketchfest January 19th and 20th in San Francisco. Spoiler alert, David's last meal is poutine. And I was very excited by this choice because I also love poutine, but I don't really know anything about it. I chat with the owner of the restaurant that claims to have invented poutine, and my friend Mitchell, who lives in Montreal and has very strong opinions about how and where poutine should be eaten, will pop in to share his hot takes. All of that coming up later in the show. But first, my interview with David Cross. David Cross mostly grew up in Georgia with Jewish parents and a British father. 3 very different food cultures. I'm curious how you ate at home growing up.
Well, little bits and pieces of all those things, really. Like, Southern for sure. There was a lot of grits, and I like Southern food, but also a lot of Jewish food too. And literally all my other relatives were in New York, either in the Bronx or in Long Island. And so whenever we would go visit, there was a lot of kind of New York Jewish stuff. When I was a little kid, homemade gefilte fish, which stunk and wasn't worth the smell or the time. On the high holy days, when you'd break your fast on Yom Kippur, that'd be like an amazing spread. If I was up in New York for the holidays, we were really poor for a big chunk of time. So it was, a lot of powdered milk, cornmeal mush, and things like that. So there wasn't a lot of, not a lot of meat and potatoes.
Mm-hmm. David told me he hated a lot of the foods from his childhood. Cream chip beef, the aforementioned powdered milk, tinned salmon laced with soft little bones. I'm curious because it's become so trendy, especially you live in Brooklyn, the whole tinned fish trend. Yeah. Having grown up, having to eat that as a kid, how do you feel about that trend?
Well, I haven't had anything outside of tuna fish, and there's a Spanish company, I want to say Ortiz.
Yeah.
I got turned on to that by a chef foodie friend of mine. To me, up until that point, tuna fish in a can was, Star-Kissed or Bumblebee
Chicken
tuna.
of the sea.
Yeah, not the greatest selling point, I think, but sure, chicken of the sea. That was like a next level thing. It was akin to the first time that I had real sushi, where I went, oh, now I get it. It really is great. Now you just eat it right out of the can. But I'm not a fan of sardines or anchovies or the other stuff that tends to come in the tin cans. That tuna is exceptional. So good for people that care and they have it. Doesn't affect me in any way. Good for the industry.
I feel
bad
this
for the fish.
Yeah, bad for the fish and the chicken that are under the sea too.
They're drowning.
Maybe they have those little cute water wings. Maybe they keep their heads above water.
They don't.
Oh, I feel this slight resentment towards this trend because my dad was born in Romania. He grew up in Israel, and he always ate that when I was a kid. Like for breakfast, he would have toast with like some kind of roasted red pepper, eggplant spread, and then he'd put sardines. So when I'd have a slumber party, all my friends were like, oh, gross. And so now I just feel like those are the same girls that are eating it, like the fancy girls. And I'm like, hey, man, what happened in 1985 when you said my dad's breakfast stunk?
Well, they were kids. It did,
That's true.
Their palates have matured and they've come around. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's true. You're right. No 5-year-old. Well, probably now there's 5-year-olds who like tin sardines.
Yeah. My kid, her palate or what she eats is like way beyond what I was eating when I was, until I was in my 20s.
And while David hated the cheap foods he grew up with when his family was poor, you have said that you really like the foods that you ate as a poor adult.
Yeah. I there's like a comfort feeling. There were a number of things, but specifically, and I just made this, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. I really, really love, and it's very, again, in that comforting way, ramen, instant ramen. And I make it with a can of chicken noodle soup. So I get a carrot and I cut it up and I boil the carrots for a little bit. I get a couple scoops of the, what do you call, the glass jar of the minced garlic that's in the oil, or
Uh-huh.
that stuff. And I put that in the soup, dump the noodles in, stir it around. Very end, I drop an egg in there and then
Yes.
the powder, and I mix it up and dump a bunch of soy sauce and then combine the two things. It's honestly like three if I'm really hungry, or four meals. And it costs, back then it cost like $1.25 for everything. And I still will make it and enjoy it. And it's just cheap crap that's not very particularly good for you.
That's the kind of thing that David would eat when he was trying to make it as a stand-up comedian. Now that he's a successful, established comedian and actor with a family, he tends to eat a bit healthier, except when he's on the road. David says it's easier than it used to be. There are bottled green juices at gas stations, and 7-Eleven has a salad if you really need it. But for the most part, it's still pretty rough.
It's really about the hours and the schedule. I know when I go on tour, I'm going to gain 10 pounds. It's going to happen. And I went on a diet before I hit the road, knowing I was going to gain 10 pounds. And I gained more, and I still have it. I mean, I'm still, I still got a belly. My daughter yesterday said, Daddy, you look pregnant. I didn't get mad. She's right. I do. I look it for sure. I'm playing the character of a pregnant man.
Arnold Schwarzenegger already did that. We can't do it again.
Yeah, I'm doing a remake.
Junior too.
So I don't eat a big meal before I do a show. I do the show, and then I always order chicken fingers. They'll have menus of all kinds. There's a Mexican restaurant, and there's this and that, and if there's something healthy, I'll order that. But quite often there's not. So Raising Cane's. I'll get some chicken strips, and then I wolf those down because I'm starving. And when I get off stage, I do like an hour and a half, and I drink 3-4 beers during the set. And now I'm jacked. My adrenaline's kicked in, and I'm up and I'm awake. And I've been drinking, and I have a bunch of chicken strips just to put in my belly. Then that's just to go drink some more. And then I'd say 70% of the time after a show, me and on this tour, I was going out with Sean Patton, who was opening, and Sean and I would go out, we'd go to the bars, and then, and I don't go back to the hotel until 1, 2 in the morning, liquored up, have some more snacks, because I always have chips or nuts or whatever as part of the backstage thing, throw them in my backpack, bottle of wine or some beer, go back to the hotel and keep drinking and eating potato chips while I'm on the internet or, watching the Hallmark channel. And you got to wake up and you got to go to the airport, you got to drive, and it's just that night after night after day after day, even though you wake up in the morning going, okay, I'm going to take it easy tonight. And then by the time the show's over, I'm just having a great time, and it's a fun show to do. Hey, let's go party, everybody.
After the break, David Cross shares his last meal, and my Canadian Fred Mitchell tells us why we should never eat poutine in a restaurant. Let's move on to the big question. What would your last meal be, David Cross?
Oh, gosh. Well, let's assume I want to keep living. I'd have the never-ending poutine. So I would just have that until, I guess, they had to forcibly kill me. And then that's murder. So I'd have poutine.
Where's your favorite poutine from, and what's your ideal poutine?
I just like the regular old. I don't like to put any of the stuff on there. If something has to be on there, I'd say the smoked meat, but I prefer it just regular old poutine. But the best poutine I've ever had is unfortunately not around anymore, but it was this guy named Paul from Toronto who was living in London and had a poutine cart, I used to, if I'm going to London, I want to get an earlier flight because if I'm going in on Sunday, I want to be able to get to the Paul Poutineery thing. It was the best and just kind of perfect, crispy fries, not too soft, like medium size, tons of really good cheese curds, and then the excellent gravy and everything stood up to it. So very good.
It's so good. I love that you arranged your flight around this too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he's not there anymore. I think he moved back to Canada last year, so that's unfortunate. And I've had poutine at the kind of well-known, sort of famous landmark places in Montreal and elsewhere, and his was the best.
So what would you like after your poutine course?
Barbecue, just pretty standard. I'll go baby back ribs.
Can you hear that without thinking of the Chili's commercial from the 90s? Like immediately in my head, I want my baby back, baby back.
That'd be my preference. And then
I'm sorry, I have to jump in here. I just sang the freaking Chili's commercial like a total ding dong, and he pretended like it didn't even happen. He just moved on. Didn't even chime in with a barbecue sauce. I have to be honest, this was a very awkward moment for me. And if you would like to see what this awkward moment looked like, and it looks far more awkward than it sounds, I'll post a video in my Instagram stories. Find me at Hello Rachel Bell. Okay, back to David's last meal.
The brisket from either Franklin's in Austin or, what's the guy? John Lewis, I think his name is. Not the deceased politician, civil rights leader, but in Charleston, South Carolina, also excellent barbecue. And then just a small, I'm starting to get stuffed now, but a small slider of pulled pork with coleslaw and pickles, because that's the way you're supposed to eat a pulled pork sandwich. And then also some fried or roasted chickpeas.
Oh.
Deep fried chickpeas with a little seasoning on them.
Like a Middle Eastern kind of seasoning?
Yep. And then for dessert, I'll just have some cheese and wine. And I don't have a sweet tooth. I'll skip the cakes and the pies and the whatnots. And then again, never-ending poutine. So it's bottomless, and a bottomless cup of coffee. And I'll just keep that coffee filled and spend my days doing that until I die of heart attack.
Of poutine poisoning.
Yeah.
For his last meal, David Cross wants baby back ribs, barbecue sauce, a pulled pork slider, fried or roasted chickpeas, wine in a cheese plate, a bottomless cup of coffee, and never-ending poutine. Poutine is French fries covered in cheese curds and brown gravy. The hot gravy slightly melts the curds, and it's a sloppy, delicious mess that requires a fork. Merriam-Webster says the word poutine comes from a Quebecois slang word for mess, but the etymology behind the name is debatable. We'll come back to that later. Poutine is the national dish of Canada, but it was created and adored in Quebec decades before it spread to other parts of Canada and down into the US. As for who invented it, there's a little bit of debate about who invented poutine, which restaurant first served it. So you tell me your side of the story.
Well, for us, there's no debate. Other people try to debate us, but for us, there's only one story, the truth.
That is Laurent Proulx, owner of Le Roi Giuseppe, a diner in Drummondville, Quebec that has an official trademark certificate from the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, naming it the official inventor of poutine.
What we know for sure is that the poutine, the way we know it, French fries, cheese curds, and gravy, is born in Drummondville.
Like I said, the origin story is debated. In 1957, in Warwick, Quebec, at a little restaurant called La Lutine Curie, a customer ordered fries to go and asked the staff to throw a handful of cheese curds into the bag. The proprietor of this restaurant allegedly exclaimed in French, "It will make a damn mess," using that slang word, poutine. But that poutine didn't have any gravy. Le Roi Giuseppe started serving their poutine with fries, cheese curds, and gravy in 1964. I want you to describe to me what the perfect poutine is, because I've had poutine many times, but I've never been to Quebec.
Okay, well, you need to start with the fries. The best case, you want to go with the fresh cut fries, nothing frozen. Once you got your fries cut, you got to give a first cooking. That would be for 7 minutes. And then you take them out and let them rest for at least an hour. When it's done, you do another cooking at 350 until golden brown. And then, if you're going to want to go extra perfect, you can salt them, the fries, for sure. As a binder for the salt, you could use a little bit of beef tallow or duck fat. That will give you an amazing French fry, that's for sure. At Giuseppe, we use duck fat. Everyone can access French fries and cheese curds. The distinctive element from one poutine to another is the sauce. The best way to do it, I'm not sure about the English word for that, but you need to use like rest of chicken and some carrots, some stuff, and you boil that.
So you're making a stock with like the bones, the carcass of the chicken, yeah.
You need to make a stock, some spices and everything, and some carrots, tomatoes to get, the kind of brownish color. So the fry is roaring hot, the cheese at room temperature, and the sauce roaring hot too. You don't want cold cheese in your poutine.
Loren says the name poutine came from the line cook responsible for creating the dish. His nickname was Tsipout, and teen means small. So poutine was like saying Lil Tsipout. Just like Americans like to debate which style of pizza is best and what toppings actually belong on a hot dog, Canadians have opinions on poutine.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mitchell Miller. Je viens de Montréal, and my name is Mitchell Miller, and I'm from Montreal.
Mitchell is a friend that I have met once through another friend. During the pandemic, you and I were pen pals, and we were sending more than letters. We were starting to send each other packaged cultural regional food items, and you sent me a packet for poutine gravy that I still have and I just keep meaning to use.
And I'm glad you brought this up because question number one I have on my notes is, did Rachel use the poutine gravy powder I sent her? So,
So you have strong opinions about poutine. What are they?
I have several. Born and raised in Quebec. So I think there's like different places where you can get it here in Quebec. You can go to an actual restaurant. There are some famous restaurants that will not be named in Montreal that serve poutine. And personally, for me, I just don't think that's where you should be getting it. If you say the words table for two or you are handed a literal menu, then what should follow from that is not ordering a poutine. The other place you can get it are these casse-croûtes, which are like diners kind of here, because it's like snack bars, I guess you would call it. There's two kinds. So there's the franchises that we have here, which you'll find more like, downtown when you're out and about. So that's a place where like post 3 a.m., post club, you just want like something greasy to soak up all that alcohol. It's cheap, it's accessible. You're ordering at a counter. Someone is like handing it to you. But really what you want is like a true casse-croûte, which is like on the side of the road. It's named after probably some guy. It's called like Jean's or like Gary's. That is what you want. You want the menu to be handwritten on like corrugated cardboard or poster board. Like you want nothing special. Maybe there's a place to sit. Almost like the worse the quality of like the environment, like the better that poutine is going to be. That is poutine in its finest and purest form. But I think if you're just going to try to supposedly have like a classic authentic poutine, have it in an authentic place. And that's like literally stopping on the side of the road and ordering.
If you're getting poutine at one of these places that I can't pronounce, I honestly can hardly understand what you're saying.
Sure. That could be my pronunciation. You're going to get the commenters being
Probably
like,
not. Are they still making homemade gravy? Are they still making homemade fries? Or are you looking for, frozen fries that they are putting in the fryer in like packaged gravy? Like, is this something that you want to be super lower end?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's funny when you're like, are they making the homemade gravy? My first thought was like, oh, I hope not. I don't want to know that like, this gravy was like there like simmering for like 10 hours and it's like richest. Like I want it to be like the low end of low end. Like that's how poutine should be. Because for me, it's not like, oh, what should we have for dinner tonight? Like poutine, it's not that. There is a time and place for it because you're just like craving that like fat, or like I said, it's like late at night and you want something. So like that really doesn't align with like, let's all sit down with like napkins and a menu and order poutine for me. I was actually thinking for this conversation for you, what I would equate it to is, I know you're a fan of tacos because I listen. If someone was visiting or like wanted to get the best tacos, you can probably get it at like a restaurant. You can probably get it at some like franchises that do a good job. I want to say like Del Taco. I don't know. They don't have those here. And then you could probably get it at like some side of the road, like either a food truck or like some stand with like someone who's just like slopping like together like a taco. And like in your head, where are you thinking really people should be getting that taco when people ask where to get it?
Yeah, taco truck. Exactly. But I would say the difference between the two is that even at a taco truck, they're still making everything from scratch. So I think it's interesting that like you want, you don't want like high quality gravy. Mitchell also isn't comfortable with poutine being Canada's national dish.
I guess I'll say on the record, I'm no separatist, but I do think that poutine is a Quebecois food. And in the same way that you wouldn't say like Chicago deep dish pizza is like an American food, I don't think we should say like poutine is a Canadian food. It has been taken across the lands and done in like many different ways. And you have like an Acadian poutine is something actually totally different. Yeah, there is something about like honoring it in its purest form, which is so funny to speak like of that about something, like we said, like poutine. I don't mind that it's being popularized, but let's not forget what authentic poutine is and where authentic poutine should be eaten. And I remember even being a young kid, and Shania Twain went on the Martha Stewart show and she made poutine, but she was like vegan or vegetarian. And so she made it with like mushroom gravy and things like that. But I also remember being like, you are from Timmins, Ontario, Shania. So this is an interesting choice to go to Martha Stewart and being like, I'm bringing you Quebecois poutine. So, I mean, much respect to Miss Twain, but that don't impress me much. Oh, is what I should have said.
God, that is. That don't impress me, Mitch. All right, I'm going to play therapist here and try to take a stab at diagnosing Mitch's pet peeve. So when poutine was a new dish, it was looked down on by people who were living outside of Quebec. It was considered a lower class food. But in the past decade or two, it's gotten really popular. And just like those girls I grew up with who thought my dad's sardines were gross and love them now, I think there's a little bit of resentment and definitely a lot of ownership that comes with being from Quebec and loving poutine. Now, like I said, I have never had poutine in Quebec, but I have had it in many other places, including an A&W in rural Alberta, Canada, and in Revelstoke, BC. And I was shocked by how good the fast food version of poutine was. The fries were great. There were so many giant cheese curds. There was so much gravy. It was a little bit salty, but it was a beautiful mess and very delicious. All right, when we come back, a speed round with David Cross. David Cross has a young daughter with his wife, actor and writer Amber Tamblyn. Is there a dish that either you think that she will remember from childhood and be like, oh, that was the thing that I love that one of my parents made? Or is there a dish that you hope she remembers that you make for her, that your wife makes?
For sure. I mean, my wife is a really good cook, and she makes more like a full meal. Like she'll make salmon and roasted potatoes and, various things. And I have always been like a big batch stew and chili and soup guy. But my chili is quite well liked. She's got some for school. I packed it in her lunch thing today, chili. And pretty much every 3 weeks or so, I will make a big batch of chili. I'll freeze half of it and we'll go through it. And everybody really likes it. So I think that will be the thing she remembers.
All right, before I let you go, I'm going to do a little speed round. And my first question is always, what is your favorite birthday cake? But since you're not a sweets person, do you just not have a cake on your birthday?
Nope. When I was, I think 5, I want to say, or maybe 6, I started having apple pie instead of birthday cake because I didn't like cake. I still don't. I don't like chocolate either. I just not a fan, and I always loved pies and cobblers like apple or peach or strawberry rhubarb. Those are kind of the top 3. But I love a good peach cobbler or anything peach, anything apple.
You're a Georgia boy.
I guess so. One of the many things that my wife and I have in common is we both aren't dessert people. We both prefer to get the cheese plate. So we do that.
What's your favorite movie theater snack?
Popcorn, absolutely, without a doubt. Nothing else. I don't want anything else, but I love popcorn.
What is the best thing that you could find in a green room before a show to eat or drink?
Specific to before a show?
Yeah.
A big thing of coconut water. Yeah.
This is a very dumb question, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. I'm embarrassed to ask it. It's so dumb. But as a comedian, is there any food that you find just inherently funny?
I think gefilte fish is kind of funny to me because it's not very good. It's not awful, but it's not very good. It's so time consuming and labor intensive, and it's just the end result is not good. I don't, and that's just in a human way, kind of funny to me. Have you had homemade?
I make it.
Oh God,
it's actually really easy. I don't find it to be. You kind of just put everything in a food processor, and then you just pour it in this loaf pan, and then you just bake it.
But I'm talking about like older grandmas who would take 6 hours to make it,
like the heads and the fish heads and everything.
Exactly, like before there was food processors and Cuisinarts and stuff.
Yeah.
Like me, they're just slaving all day, and it stinks. And then you eat it, and you're like, oh,
wow!
Well, you could have skipped that. I'd rather have a shoe.
And last question, since you're going to be at SF Sketchfest, what is your favorite thing to eat when you're in San Francisco?
Oh man, well, I kind of like going to Japantown and going to robot sushi places. And
I haven't done that yet.
There's some good stuff there. And what's the place next to Nanking? I want to say House of Hunan, or
I don't know. My family, I grew up in the Bay Area. We would go to House of Nanking, but I don't know what's next to it because we never went next door.
That's like a shadow of what it used to be. It used to be great, and then they expanded, and it's just not. Now it's kind of touristy, and not the food quality. I think has dropped off a bit. There used to be a place called Yu Lee's, YU-LEE, on the corner of Jackson and Hyde, which had massive, delicious pot stickers.
Ooh.
Oh, man, really good.
And that was David Cross's last meal. You can find a link in the show notes to David's website, where you can find even more links to his new podcast and his new comedy special, Worst Daddy in the World. Where did the title of that special come from?
My daughter. She would call me the worst daddy in the world because I would give her something or do something for her, let her do something, ridiculous. And then she'd pout and be like, "You're the worst daddy in the world." And I was trying to come up with a title for the special. And then I went, oh, there you go.
Get tickets to see David at SF Sketchfest in a couple weeks. It is an amazing comedy festival. It runs from January 18th to February 4th, and the lineup is always insane. I flew down a few years ago to see former Your Last Meal guest Jenny Slate do stand-up, and that same year, there was a Waiting for Guffman reunion featuring the entire cast. Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Christopher Guest. I was so bummed that it was sold out, so I don't want you to have those feelings. Get your tickets now. Thanks to Loren Proul, owner of Le Roi Giuseppe, a vintage 50s diner in Drummondville, Quebec. Well, I went to your website, and I have to admit, this is like, classic dumb American. I knew that in Quebec, people spoke French, but I didn't know that it was the dominant language. I thought that people spoke French and English, and all these websites and menus are all in French only without an English option, so I couldn't read anything because I don't speak French. I was surprised by how dominant the French was.
Well, we're in the center of Quebec. In Montreal, you have better chance to find English menu and stuff. Outside of Montreal is almost 100% French.
Thanks to Mitchell Miller, Montreal, Quebec.
Yes, and that was one of my first notes, was to make sure that throughout the podcast that you pronounce Montreal and Quebec properly.
Did you hear me? I said it right.
Yes. It's a pet peeve of mine when on usually American shows or movies, they're like, we're going to Montreal. So it's Montreal, Quebec, not Quebec, and not Montreal with a U.
Montreal.
It sounded like you were doing it well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course I did. I mean, yeah. Your Last Meal is a product of Cascade Public Media. The show was created, hosted, and produced by me. Sarah Bernard does the construction production, and it was mastered by Isaac Kaplan-Woolner. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. Please recommend it to a friend, or even better, write a review on Apple Podcasts. You can find me on Instagram at HelloRachelBell, and please follow my newsletter, rachelbell.substack.com. For those who follow, you know that I don't send out many newsletters, so it's not going to clog up your inbox. I'm Rachel Bell, and this is Your Last Meal. That don't impress me much. That don't impress me much. Honk, 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 honk.
But my main is going to be pizzaghetti. And all the Quebecois listening are like, oh, okay, so he gets it. Pizzaghetti is also like a very like Quebecois thing that you would get in a restaurant. And so I'm doing pogo. I'm doing like pizzaghetti.
Okay.
Yeah. So
wait a minute. I mean, obviously, like based on the portmanteau, I have an idea of what pizzaghetti is, but I'm just so surprised in a city like Montreal and a place like Quebec that is, you know, so old and historic that something locally known is called pizzaghetti. What is this dish?
It's either spaghetti on top of pizza, or it is a pizza that's been cut and then literally spaghetti is just served like on the plate in the middle.
There was a Eater article from 2014. Pizzaghetti is Quebec's most shameful food is the title. It looks good.
So if I'm doing a real like Quebec casse-croûte, I'm going to have 2 steamies, which are steamed hot dogs. So the hot dog itself is steamed and the bun is steamed. And then you can get it all dressed. But if you want to sound like a real Quebecois, 2 steamies all dressed with a poutine and a Pepsi. Pepsi is synonymous with Quebec and not Coke.